Hi guys, this is your instructor Dan Hood for Photoshop for Presentations, and I'm doing a short little intro video today for Photoshop Elements. For you folks out there that are using Photoshop Elements, I just wanted to give a quick tour of the basic tools and the basic operation of Photoshop Elements, and then after that I'll have a few more of these videos that gets into more detail with certain tools and other aspects of Photoshop Elements that may be a little different than Photoshop. So anyway, today the first thing we're going to do is that we're going to look at Photoshop Elements and the general workspace. As you can see, when you open up Photoshop Elements, and by the way, this is Photoshop Elements 13, but this really, all of this applies to basically Photoshop Elements from 6 on to 13. So everything that I go over today will be in almost all different versions of Photoshop Elements. So what we're going to look at today is, first of all, we're going to come over here to the toolbar to quickly look at the toolbar and the tools that are available to you in Photoshop Elements. And there are some familiar ones here. You have the marquee tool, you have the lasso tool right here, which are a lot of my favorite selection tools to select pieces of your image. Here you have the paintbrush, you have the clone stamp tool, here you have the eraser tool, the brush tool, and the eyedropper is right here, color picker, and the text tool is right there. And so these are all very familiar tools. The other thing I'll point out down here is the layers palette. So the layers palette in Photoshop Elements is usually hidden unless you need to use it, then it'll pop up over here. But usually it is hidden, and that's a good thing because it just gives you more space to work. Actually, the layout of Photoshop Elements in a lot of ways is better than Photoshop. I think the interface is a little bit more intuitive to where the tools are placed. So it makes it really good for especially someone who's a little bit more novice at using Photoshop. It makes it easier to get around. Okay, so here we are in the Photoshop editor. So now you have the editor, and then down here you also have the organizer, and this is a special feature of Elements that Photoshop doesn't really have. What this is basically is this is a bin, as it were, to keep all of your images, be it if you import it from your camera, or you can also grab these from your hard drive. In this case, I set up an album and I called it Photoshop Images, and I placed all of the different images that I use during this Photoshop for Presentations class, and I placed them all in this album so I can have easy access to them. So just to get started, let's first, in the organizer that you have here, let's take this image here of the desert scene, and you see how it has a check mark now. That means that it's ready to go, and to take it into the editor, all you have to do is double click it. And I'm sorry, actually by double clicking it actually makes it the main image in Organizer. Once you do that and you want to edit it, then you have to come down here to the editor. Then you click that, and that will launch the Photoshop Elements editor. Here you have a little thumbnail of your open file that is available, and here is the picture of the desert. Alright, just to quickly go over the tools. The tools really, as far as function goes, do the exact same thing that it does in Photoshop. Like here you have the square marquee, and that's exactly what it does. It draws a square marquee. And then you also have the paintbrush tool. You have your color, your foreground and your background colors down here. And you can paint just as you can in Photoshop. You have the eraser tool. Here you can choose your brush sizes right here, which in Photoshop the palette is over to the right or is a floating palette, but all of the palettes in Photoshop Editor are all down here. So here, this is where you can choose your brush, the size of it, or in this case the size of your eraser, and then you can just erase just as you would in Photoshop. You can add your text. And once you're finished with your text, you press the check mark and it is placed. Okay, now we'll open up the layers palette just to show how text is always put into its own layer. You still have the background here, and then let's say that I wanted to bring in another piece to add to this. I'm going to go and I'm going to find a piece of another thing to put in there, and let's say I'm going to put in the spurs, and there are the spurs. So you have the spurs in your document, and they're on a separate layer over here. Then you have the text tool right here, and then there's your background. So besides using the effects here, which there is another video I do for effects in Photoshop, which is basically the same idea, the same way of using the tool in Elements. It's just in a different spot down here. And here, this is the different elements that you can do. And that's about it. This is just a short overview of the tools and layers and different functions of Photoshop Elements Editor. I'll have a few more videos that show other skills and tools from the Photoshop Editor later on. So stay tuned, and thank you very much for watching.